Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast, where we dive deep into the media industry headlines and dissect the digital disruption that diverges the masses into the new media counterculture and away from the media establishment. Here is the king of podcasts.
Here we go, another Broadcasters Podcast. Thanks for being here with me. You're also the king of podcasts. And I hope, if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and pass the word to subscribe to the show wherever you find podcasts, either through Apple, Google, Amazon Music, and all other major podcast portals. And, of course, the YouTube channel. You can also hear me there, youtube.com/JBRASCO951. You can find all my content there as well, and I hope you do. So this week, we're going to kind of get into the 2022 preview of what things we should be looking forward to into the new year. We are starting right into it, and one of the things that I think is going to be the biggest move is the continued comeback of the box office. And right off the bat, they're saying that it was a 78% increase, right, of what was all being done out there in terms of what really did well overall of all the movies that came out. It was a huge return. Plus, we know that the movie theaters are going to get back to the normal setup of having their movies shown not a day and date. No more of the synchronized release on streaming and through the theaters. That's going to go away. So there's going to be more money going to the movie theaters again. And we're definitely realizing what movies are the big ones to look out for this coming year. There's a lot. Now, the first 3 months of the year, it's a little bit slow because they have made some moves on some of the movies they had where they've been pushed around a little bit now because the Omicron variant. Hollywood and New York and all the major entertainment meccas are all concerned about what's going on with the variant. And if you didn't hear, I told on my wrestling podcast, but I don't know if I told her about it on here, but you know, I had my tussle with the COVID. I had the vaccinations, the boost, fought it off, quick, done. Hopefully got the antibodies, and hopefully I don't have to get it again. And, you know, it's not something I got to go and worry about going forward, which is what we're hoping for altogether. But other people are starting to experience the outbreak. They're starting to feel the COVID, this Omicron variant, which is said to be a mild strain, and people are able to go ahead and recover from it, in most cases, pretty quickly. If everybody's been vaccinated, that means you were going to get it, but then you can fight it off pretty easily, and you'll be able to handle what happens here pretty well. And that's the whole thought process. I mean, even doctors I'm seeing now are finally seeing to that point. So, you know, take with a grain of salt whatever the media tells you and all these supposed analysts and experts that are up there, because TV news, as we talked about last week, it's in decline. So you can continue to be in decline. I'm actually in support of that because I'm not much when it comes to media and how people are handling it. But there is some news. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on in the program. But let me just give you a quick rundown. We're going to talk about movies, the tentpoles that are bound to surge in the 2022 box office. The day-and-day experiment is going away this year. It's being said that the Hollywood is now a much leaner, meaner business. We know we have things that all the unionization issues, all the possible strike issues, that's out the window now. We are clear for takeoff for Hollywood to make a comeback as long as it's able to go ahead and get through what they need to do. Hey, award season is about to get affected with Golden Globes. The Grammys have now been postponed indefinitely, so they're going to deal with that part. But production, okay, all the pomp and circumstance, that's still going to get affected right now. Obviously, even the Super Bowl could be affected this year, but even, you know, officials at the Super Bowl in SoFi Stadium and outside of Los Angeles, they're saying we're going ahead with the Super Bowl. It's going to go as planned, and there's confidence that everything's going to go fine without a hitch. And there you go. So you have that, and then we're going to know that genre film and TV are aiming for a busier 2022. So the superhero sci-fi movies, the cinematic universes, that is what's going to be front and center on television and in film more than ever. And the younger audience is eating it right up. It doesn't matter how many times you respin, recycle, or retread any kind of cinematic universe, people are going to keep going through it. Even with the fact that the DC universe and people are upset about that Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck are not going to be recognized in the DC universe. They're going to just recast those characters into a new Justice League. Whatever that's going to be, that's the plan. Marvel's got a bunch of movies coming up this year. DC has their own set that they're really banking on. So we've talked about those. We're going to go into more in detail right now. And we'll also look at some other things when it comes to radio and how it's being supported by those listening on smart speakers. We'll talk about that. So if you have Alexa, or you're talking with Google and asking about that. We'll also talk about, even though we only had 1 year of the subscriptions by new movies channeled into getting new subscribers for the streaming services, we're going to talk about how there's some information about how HBO Max did benefit from it a lot in 2021 as a result. But still, nobody wants to go and do that anymore. And then there's more information, some stats and information about navigating streaming video content, the trust in media being low, which is follow-up from last week, and the amount of news engagement. We'll talk about that as well. It's all in here, mixed in on the program tonight. Let's get it started. So first thing off the bat is the movies that are coming up this year and what we have going on. Like I said, a couple of things that are going to be a very important factor. There will no longer be movies coming out at the same time where you can watch it at home. That's done. They did it for 1 year because of the pandemic. That's it. They're not going to go back to that again. Well, I mean, it happened part of 2020 and into 2021. Done. It is done. So let's go into the story from Deadline.com. They talk about it. Because even with all the movies that were pushed to streaming, it did take away from what was a really great comeback for the movie theaters in the box office, because even then, some of the box office results were diluted and came down as a result. But we also know that part of it is as well that they had an issue with, some of the types of movies that people were willing to go out and go watch. So like the older, more mature, old adult movies that were out there for an older audience, that really didn't draw anybody this year. But all the cinematic universe movies did, for the most part. So that's something to be considered. The global box office jumped by 78% to $21.4 billion. Huge. It made it more of its share of money. So there's that was very made possible. So that's what you got right there. So let's look at what happened now. In terms of the box office, well, before I do anything, I should go and talk about the movies that everybody's anticipating for this year, because Rotten Tomatoes did a really good job of putting that out there. So let's go month by month quickly of the movies that I know I'm going to be looking at and keeping an eye on. I'm going to be watching. As you know, I've got my subscription plan, and I go, and I have not missed many movies. And over the holidays, last Friday night, or actually last Saturday, I did go see Kingsman, and I was disappointed. It's a movie we didn't need. Much like Matrix, we didn't need that movie to be remade either, or another version of it. So an origin story of the Kingsman was not necessary, and going so far ahead with the Matrix without just recasting it and just following the universe again of the Matrix and just changing the characters out, well, they didn't want to do that either. But they're going to try it anyway on the next run around. I'm sure another Matrix is coming up soon. It'll be in the works. Now, there are a lot of great titles coming up. You have The Batman, Thor, Love and Thunder, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse Part 1. Then you'll have Uncharted and the Lost City. You'll have Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Bob's Burgers movie. And then you'll have Scream and Halloween Ends in the horror genre. So let's see what happens so far of what we have. And of course, because we're still under pandemic issues and we're still seeing that right now, the Omicron variant is still very much keeping things subject to change. Some of the dates might change even when I go ahead and record this. So just keep that in mind. But this is what we have as I record this tonight, January 6th into January 7th. 355 is the first movie coming out. That'll be releasing this weekend as I'm recording, and I'll be watching that. They pushed it up 1 week, and that's with Jessica Chastain, Lupita Nyong'o, Diane Kruger, Penelope Cruz, Fan Bingbing, Sebastian Stan, Edgar Ramirez. Spy thriller. It's this whole kind of like an MI6 looking kind of thing. It's all female led, but it looks good. The return of Scream also comes out January 14th. We got that coming up. And that's pretty much it for January. There are a lot of limited movies, by the way. So it looks like a lot of the Oscar acclaimed, the for-your consideration types. There's loads of that going on right now into the schedule, because I'm looking right now. There's at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's like a whole lot of movies right now that are coming out, and I don't know anything about them. And I don't know if I'm going to see them in my movie theater or not, or if they're going to actually make it into anything later on. We don't know yet. But there's a lot here. Keep an eye on it anyways. So those are the movies we got in January. Then after that, in February, Jackass Forever, which was pushed back several times. It was going to be in October last year, and they pushed it back. They got some celebrity cameos in this one this time around. Tony Hawk, Tyler the Creator, Eric Andre, and more. I think MJK is in it, right? Machine Gun Kelly. So there's that part. Then you got Marry Me, which is Jennifer Lopez, Owen Wilson, Sarah Silverman, and Maluma, baby, right? The reggaeton star. So you got that going for you coming up. Then there's Death on the Nile. That's scheduled for February 11th as well. And that's Gal Gadot, Kenneth Branagh, Armie Hammer, Annette Bening, and among other casts. A full cast on there. Kind of a follow-up of the Murder on the Orient Express that got remade in 2017. Then you got Uncharted. That's Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. That looks pretty interesting. It's an Indiana Jones style film. Kind of looks like National Treasure. Kind of like same feel to that too. That's what you got in February. Then March, The Batman. Robert Pattinson taking the role. That looks really good. And, you know, I'm kind of excited like I would have been when the Christian Bale Batmans came out. But that's ultimately the Batman I'm always going to hold as the gold standard of Batman movies. More than Michael Keaton, more than George Clooney or Val Kilmer, or, you know, that's just it. Christian Bale is the Batman. That was the one that was the best. And let's see if Robert Pattinson can hold up and do the job. And it looks good. Looks extra dark, which I also can appreciate as well. Now, going on to that, you got Turning Red. It's a Pixar offering, so animated. I'm going to just skip. You also have The Lost City, and that's Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum. This feels like Romancing the Stone, done in a bad way, but also trying to be funny. And I'm just not much into that. So yeah, romance novelist, you know, and a cover model. So, like I said, just give me Romancing the Stone over and over. We don't need this movie. But they did it anyway. So this movie was pushed back. April 1st is Morbius, Jared Leto. You got Michael Keaton in it. Tyrese Gibson's in it. It's been trailered like crazy in my movie theater. So we're getting to that finally. That'll be good to see. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 did well with the first one. So they're bringing that back. That's good. Then you got Ambulance. That's Jake Gyllenhaal. That's leading the movie. And it will be Michael Bay that's directing it. It was originally February 18th, now pushed to April 8th. Then you got The Bad Guys, another animated feature, which is a pretty heavy cast. Sam Rockwell, Awkwafina, Craig Robinson, and Mark Maron. The Northman. That's Alexander Skarsgård, Anya Taylor-Joy, Nicole Kidman, Ethan Hawke. A pretty heavy cast in this. So this looks... I mean, it's a fictional looking thing, and I'm not sure what it's all about. But it's a revenge story set in the past. There's not much more to say about that, but we'll worry about that soon. If we didn't know, there's a Legally Blonde 3 that's coming out. So Reese Witherspoon, Jennifer Coolidge are re-establishing their roles, and here we go. Then you got Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and that's May 6th. Then you got the DC League of Super Pets, an animated feature on May 20th. The Bob's Burgers movie, which was scheduled for last year. Now we're up to it. Then highly anticipated Top Gun Maverick, and that will now be May 27th. So Memorial Day weekend, we got that. Jurassic World Dominion comes up after that on June 10th. Then you got Lightyear, the follow-up, or the pre-story of Buzz Lightyear and the Toy Story franchise, or cinematic universe, right? That's June 17th. Then you got Minions, The Rise of Gru. That's July 1st. Then Thor: Love and Thunder, that's also July 8th. And there's a lot of people going to be in this one too. Then you got Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore, that's July 15th. Nope, which is a Jordan Peele horror film. And that's July 22nd. Black Adam, and that's the Rock's feature as a superhero in the DC universe. There's the all-powerful anti-superhero. That'll be July 29th. So like I said, DC, off the bat, they're hitting big on some of their movies. And, then you got Marvel all hitting with Doctor Strange and Thor right off the bat. Tom Cruise, second movie, will be Mission Impossible 7, the second movie of the year. The 7th in the franchise. And, those are always solid, right? Right at the end of the month, end of September 30th. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. You get that coming back. That's October 7th. Halloween Ends is October 14th. So you got a little run up to Halloween with that. November 4th is The Flash. And that looks fascinating. That's a lot of... the superhero movies, they're just stacking them up. Basically, every season, you're getting some kind of movie to go and watch. So that's a huge thing. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. That movie will do really well. Given the fact that we don't have Chadwick Boseman with what's going on here, they have to go ahead and figure out how to go ahead and we have to go and see what the movie's going to give us when it comes to King T'Challa's absence and how it'll be addressed and what happened to him. We'll have to figure out what that's going to be. December 16th, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Avatar 2, long anticipated. That's December 16th. The Untitled Mario movie is December 21st. Man, there's some other things. And then they got movies that are still scheduled to go ahead and come on, but there were movies now that have been pushed back. So you got Sesame Street that was originally scheduled for January 14th, and that got pushed now. And there's no date to be announced. Hocus Pocus 2 is going to be on Disney+. Then you got a bunch of other movies that were also scheduled in January that got pushed back. You got Deep Water, that was Ben Affleck and Ana de Armas. I was looking forward to that, but they pushed that back. Another Cheaper by the Dozen. They're doing that now, and then Gabrielle Union and Zach Braff are part of that. Then a movie, Blonde, which is supposed to come out, and that is also getting pushed back, scheduled to be on Netflix. That's all the movies they have right there that are scheduled, and everybody's looking forward to. It's a lot of good movies. You got This Dog, that's another Channing Tatum movie that'll be out coming up too. You got Downton Abbey that's still scheduled to be coming out in March. And there's just so much more that's in here that has not been announced yet or has not been made up front as well. There's the Elvis movie that has also planned to be coming out. That's in June. Not being said about that, but that's another movie that's coming out as well. Also, I mentioned that there's another Puss in Boots that's coming out as well, if everybody's interested in that. You also have Ticket to Paradise, and that's George Clooney and Julia Roberts leading that movie. Then you have an untitled movie about the Bee Gees. You still have Creed 3 that's not being talked about. That's also November 23rd. And there are also so many other movies that could be considered in 2022, including another Sherlock Holmes. That's also been considered. Another Tomb Raider that could be considered and brought in. The Minecraft movie. There's a lot that are still sitting on the list that could be brought out. That could be widescreen release as well, which nobody's talking about yet, but we'll keep an eye on that. So there's a lot to look at. Now let's look at what the box office actually did in terms of the year. Numbers were up. Global box office estimated $21.4 billion. International box office hit $16.9 billion, 66% up above the last year. Now, one of the things that was also considered is when you had movies that were going directly to streaming at the same time as going to the theater, whenever you bring that opportunity in front, piracy is going to be made immediate. So the issue of piracy was a concern as domestic day-and-date streaming releases undeniably approved hackers with pristine copies to circulate. Now, they can still are not able to quantify how much that is, but they could suggest it could be as much as 10 to 25% of a film's potential international box office. So another lesson being learned by studios, producers, and more is films can only be released when most of the key major territories in the world are open. You can't just look at domestic. You have to look at Asia, Europe, Brazil, and Mexico to get an idea when movies can be released. And you have to look beyond even the top 15 charts, but forecasting that in the future is clearly difficult in such times. So there's some Monday morning quarterbacking about, for instance, like a movie like a Top Gun Maverick, which was scheduled to be released November 2021, and that got pushed to Memorial Day weekend 2022. Okay, it would have gone up against Ghostbusters if it were done that way, but Ghostbusters would have come out first, and then you had No Time to Die that also came out. So you had those movies to contend with along with Top Gun. But again, they were scheduled to go on July 4th weekend, or it was going to be in the summer. So when they pushed back to November, you could have known they were not going to stay in November in the first place. They were going to have to move later. So it is a summer movie for the most part. And so that would make sense to go and do that and push it again. So when it was being promoted, CinemaCon in August, they did put a successful launch of clips and footage. They could have put it out in November 2021. It wouldn't have done as much as it could next year when the situation will be better. To realize the maximum potential of these types of movies, particularly Maverick, it's going to play to an older, nostalgic audience. The world needs to be firing on all cylinders. Tom Cruise even turned up at Cinema Europe in October to reassure exhibition, quote, "We're out here for you. We're never going to stop." So right now, the challenge for most of these big movies is finding the right window. And one international distributor executive said that throughout the pandemic, quote, "We have seen audiences return when the right titles come along, when consumer confidence is on the rise. Having those two factors play a huge role in it." So the three top worldwide movies among studio films, you had Spider-Man No Way Home, No Time to Die, and F9, is that despite the date jockeying, finding that sweet spot was primordial. The early part of 2021, you had a lot of local Chinese titles in the home market only as films don't travel, while major movies in the UK and France were closed until May after roughly 7 months of darkened screens. And there were positive signs to see a strong return to cinemas reopening. Australia was also doing really well. The grosses were impressive considering what was going on. And Saudi Arabia is also considered an emerging market, with the only growth to be seen from 2021 versus 2020. Family films had up and down ride in 2021 amid the uncertainty of taking kids to the cinemas. Disney's Encanto recently just crossed the $200 million mark globally. It's the top animated movie of 2021. Now the soundtrack is starting to make, some of their songs in the soundtrack are making the Billboard charts or making the charts globally. So there's that. Don't talk about Bruno, right? That's the gimmick. Then you have Universal DreamWorks' The Boss Baby Family Business that will cross $100 million internationally. Paramount Pictures had Paw Patrol, the movie, that will cross $90 million overseas at the end of the year. And we still have to see if Sing 2 did really well in movie theaters for the Christmas time. Spider-Man No Way Home, that no matter of Omicron, folks would not be deterred. The timing was a sweet spot. No Way Home may go down as a pivotal moment, not just because people can went back to the theaters like moths to a flame, but they also loved the movie in the theater, not camcording it, but sharing it on social media, the reactions in the room. People might forget what was the biggest film of all time, but they'll remember seeing Spider-Man. It's true. It's the cinematic universe movies, especially a Spider-Man, or especially the Marvel movies of that magnitude. That is a movie that's like a performance. And that crowd is so involved and so attached to it. And they look at this like an opera, like a play, like a Broadway play that's just fantastic. Being given everything that they want, that they could possibly desire in a movie like that. So the worldwide studios, Disney did the best when they made, almost $3 billion overall. And globally, Sony, $2.4 billion, Universal, $2.3 billion. So remember, the movies they run, Warner Brothers, $2.25, and that took a little bit hit because of HBO Max and all the movies they put over there. Paramount was $500 million. Lionsgate, $165 million. And that's what you got there. And so with Disney, you just look at the movies they had when it came to all their, they had a bunch of movies that also came out. I never saw Free Guy, Ryan Reynolds. I didn't catch that yet, but it did very well. So you're going to probably see another one of those. $330 million globally. Encanto, again, over $200 million. Cruella made over $200 million worldwide. Jungle Cruise also broke that mark. Eternals broke over $400 million. If the movie was a little bit weak compared to the other Marvel movies, like Shang-Chi broke $432 million worldwide, and that's also because it didn't even hit China directly, which was another issue. You had Black Widow that broke $379 million, worldwide, but also that's one of the first movies that came back as really the pandemic kind of just started to subside, and things really opened up when it came to movie theaters, right around July and June. Now, what about streaming? Well, actually, let me get one more thing here. So as we said, the day-and-date experiment, that is done. But streaming will still be important. We'll talk about that in a second. Because of how Spider-Man No Way Home did so well in the movie theaters, studio executives would be financially foolish, according to Deadline.com, to put their big box office movies anywhere else but the big screen. Because remember, you got Avatar 2, you got Doctor Strange, you got Thor, you got Black Panther, Sonic the Hedgehog, Top Gun, Batman, all part of the highlights of 2022 for the big movies. That's not counting the critically acclaimed, but this is the big box office blockbusters. Now, what they do say is that as older adults remain slow to return to cinemas during the pandemic, the question becomes more of these types of movies, often Oscar bait ones, will they be released day and date or on a truncated theatrical window? The whole streaming of it all might not be glamorous enough. And so there's always, again, more people asking what if things would have gotten better with certain movies if they didn't have to push them back. For instance, Wonder Woman 1984, could they have held it back from Christmas 2020? I don't think it would have done any better. When I look at, if I had to go look at that in the theater, I would have been disappointed. It wasn't as good. It kind of held back. And that's unfortunate because I like Gal Gadot a lot. Now, Warner Media learned from their experiment that given the uproar from town, especially, because remember, we had all those lawsuits, namely Scarlett Johansson, leading the charge to get money back for streaming, plus the unions trying to make sure that streaming was going to be taken care of for them. So their plan that was internally called Project Popcorn cost the studio in excess of $200 million to buy out talent for these movies going onto the service, and it will never occur again. And 3 months after the announcement, Warner Brothers said they're going to go back to a theatrical 45-day window effective this year. And then the question would be, will people still try to go ahead and push out simultaneous streaming and box office? Well, they talked to Paramount CEO Brian Robbins, who looks to eventize Paramount Plus. So normally there's 2 to 3 months in advance before a studio opts to change course with the film's distribution plan. So, for instance, Universal is the only studio looking to go and do that right now because Peacock will stream the Jennifer Lopez, Owen Wilson romantic comedy Marry Me on February 11th. They're going to try that. And we don't know how much the streaming services are doing after all because they're not really giving us that much information about how many subscribers they have. They're keeping it under their vest. Because right now, all the money that's been committed to the streaming and trying to keep up with it and trying to keep the subscriber counts going up or staying steady is a big problem. Because right now they're talking about that. Consumer habits changed only because they were forced from March 2020 to March 2021 when theaters were closed due to COVID. So if you started seeing the day and date idea, it only would have been effective right then and there. If you just need to get movies that you couldn't keep on the shelf for much longer, you were losing money on them, you just had to get them out, you had to go streaming with it. That's why you had no choice. The executives' desire to send theatrical films to their streaming services day and date is more about how cash-strapped they are given their investment in streaming. It's the corporate thing, man. They put all that advanced money in. They need to make money off of that, so they can't be handling the fact that they're not getting enough content to keep making the money that they need to go and make off of their investment. They have to get a return. So they had to do something here. So they're worried about the amount of money they committed to all these newfound businesses. Disney has committed as much as $9 billion to Disney Plus by 2024, and they expect to lose a lot now this year, but the losses are going to be dropping as we speak. Comcast has spent over $2 billion on Peacock in the last 2 years. $1 billion of it goes, or part of that going to WWE Wrestling, right? And then AT&T originally pledged $4 billion to HBO Max, and now they went into talks to have Warner Media sold to Discovery. And all these conglomerations cannot roll out the content fast enough. Netflix, with 214 million global subscribers, they're cannibalizing over one another in regards to the amount of viewers they can get, as many as subscribers growth are starting to plateau. And share prices for some of the studios are in free fall. So their stock prices are hurting as a result of that. Because if they can't report the numbers, they can't report, oh, look, we're growing. Keep buying. They can't do it. Can't be done. So they're quiet about how many subscribers they get. But what we have been able to find out is HBO Max and HBO Linear subscribers are 45 million total. Viacom CBS has 47 million worldwide. And that's for everything including Showtime, BET, and Paramount Plus, not just the streamer. Peacock contends it has 54 million subs, but some of those are Xfinity cable subscriptions who feasibly are free to access the service. And that the people that pay for the highest movie tier, the $10 a month deal, that's only 3 million of those 54. That's it. So to try to get more subscribers, that's when they decided, well, we're not going to put the movie straight out to box office. Halloween Kills, The Boss, Baby, and Marry Me, they're pushing out the Peacock to try to desperately get subscribers. They're all trying to make their money back as quickly as possible. So these conglomerates have traded in profit for a volume strategy of attempting to mushroom subscribers. Theatrical makes streaming content all the more attractive at the end of the day. So by the movies being in the box office, you're getting rid of that direct-to-cable kind of stench that all these other movies get, or direct-to-Netflix. So to get it so it can be in a theater, and it's something that you miss in the theater, to get to watch it as a premium at your home, like you did DVDs and Blu-rays and all that, well, that's what they need to have, is that kind of feel to it. And that's what works for them. So that's a pretty logical way of thinking about it. Among the movies that were on streaming, that were strictly streaming, Red Notice was the most watched movie measured by Summit TV on streaming in 2021, seen by almost 10 million U.S. households in its first 30 days. Netflix said that it was one of the most watched ever movies with 364 hours in its first 28 days. The biggest event on streaming was the Seinfeld finale, 76.3 million viewers. Now, there's a whole lot that I could talk about as well that they did when it came to the movies and when they pushed them out and what big of a difference there was. There's a lot to be considered there, but in the story I have for Deadline really goes through that. I'll just leave that for you. Just go and look for the link over on the website, broadcasterspodcast.com. You can find all of it right there for you. So behind Netflix and its 214 million global subscribers, Disney Plus has gotten over 118 million paying customers in its first 2 years. HBO and HBO Max have 73.8 million worldwide. That's big. And that's more than what Warner Media had actually forecasted. Now, some of the insiders here are talking about how these streaming services have achieved their 2024 targets without trying. Now there's real competition to keep the customers. And that's why Disney and others are investing heavily in content. So in the same boat that Netflix has been, throwing in billions upon billions of dollars in content. It's a lot of stuff to go and put in. So this year, large global streaming players will look at stealing share and developing new sources of revenue. You'll see a bifurcation in the industry, those who can charge rent and those who pay rent. So there'll be a class of video streamers like Netflix, Disney, and possibly Warner Media, coupled with Discovery, that have enough scale to serve as a front door to a bundle of content. On the platform side, aggregators like Google, Roku, Apple, and Amazon, with Fire TV and Prime Video, will gain traction. Now, there was some frustration as well in terms of people trying to go and find content to watch. There was an Accenture survey of 6,000 adults that found the top consumer frustrations were trying to find content in a fragmented, over-the-top landscape and having to pay for multiple individual services. And the trend is going to pick up speed as smaller streamers fight to get discovered, which is why I think we're going to start seeing some consolidation, bundling of services at some point. So there's an opportunity that these streaming aggregators can bring together multiple content services. So the Googles, Amazons, the Rokus are going to have to do something to bundle everything together to make it easier for people to go ahead and access content. So Netflix is taking the direction. They're adding games to their core service. There's a lot being done right now at the Consumer Electronics Show about gaming, where Samsung has created a new gamer for flagship TVs, and it'll be set to launch later in the year on select 2022 Samsung smart TV models. Their thought is that at Samsung, it's gaming's the next frontier, the last major media sector to go streaming. Univision will also be creating their own subscription service, as they're going to be acquiring Mexico's Televisa network. They're planning to debut a rebranded free streaming service incorporating their existing Prende TV, which comprises 40,000 plus hours of on-demand programming and more than 100 live channels. These two services will have complete distinct content lineups. So Univision is going to get into the mix. You knew the Spanish was going to get into there some way, somehow. And because of all the money being spent on content, that means that genre for film and TV, all these cinematic universes are going to be busier in 2022. Let's look at what they got coming up. So Marvel's going to have a whole bunch of things because they have 10 projects right now in the mix. That's what they had with WandaVision, Falcon the Winter Soldier, Loki, Black Widow, Shang-Chi, What If, Venom, Let There Be Carnage, Eternals, Hawkeye, and Spider-Man No Way Home. That was in theaters and Disney Plus. And then for Marvel in 2021, Marvel has Morbius, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Marvel Studios Moon Knight, Doctor Strange, She-Hulk, Thor Love and Thunder, Ms. Marvel, Secret Invasion, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, I Am Groot, and the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. And that's probably a few more Disney Plus projects scheduled as well. And as for DC, they're going to have the Batman, DC League of Super Pets, Black Adam, The Flash, Batgirl, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. And their deal is going to be less about narrative cohesiveness and more about the multiverse, as audiences are introduced to a great number of DC stable of characters. Much like the MCU, the DCEU is furthering its commitment to representation, both on screen and behind the camera, with Batgirl, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, Supergirl, and Blue Beetle. And DCEU should be able to get some new franchises going, maintain excitement for those already started, and rely on the always dependable allure of Batman. Now, you did have some movies that are trying to get rehashed or retooled. Mortal Kombat, Snake Eyes, and The Matrix Resurrections that fizzled upon release. So the audiences are most likely to rely on superheroes for their big budget thrills, but some properties are simply more viable for streaming services. So that's the idea where Mortal Kombat and Snake Eyes could have been better for streaming. Army of the Dead, Tomorrow War, and Red Notice were movies that were dependable box office hits. They could have been, but now they're highlights of streaming services. So now it's supposed to be a consideration of what genre stuff should be on streaming as opposed to what should be in the box office. So other cinematic universes that are going to be coming back as well. You got Jurassic World, Dominion and Mission Impossible 7, Uncharted, Fantastic Beasts, Top Gun, and Avatar 2. You have all those coming together. Let's see what's going to happen with those. And there's been talk about how some horror movies it came back pretty well, streaming and in box office. But, there's still going to be more horror movies that got to be brought up to the forefront, because we're going to have to see if horror movies make their way back to the theaters as well and how that's going to work out. So let's see how that was going to work out altogether. And if you want more information about the Accenture study about the navigating streaming video content and all these frustrations that are being done, there's more information I got there in the links. Just go look at broadcasterspodcast.com for that. There's one other story that was brought up in terms of how well HBO Max did with the releases of their movies as a whole, where they put most of their slate of box office movies, they decided to push them out. Not so much for box office, but directly and simultaneously on their streaming service. There was a lot of movies they put out. Let's look at what they put out so far and see what they did. So the weekend tallies for certain movies that they had Judas and the Black Messiah was under 1 million viewers. 1.2 million for Tom and Jerry was back in February 2021. Zack Snyder's Justice League, 1.8 million. Now this is what was on HBO Max, not what was done in the theaters, by the way. Godzilla vs. Kong had about 3.6 million viewers in its initial weekend. Mortal Kombat, 3.8 million. Like, there wasn't a whole lot there that was out there, and The Matrix Resurrections got 2.8 million. Many Saints of Newark, 1 million. Less than 1 million for Malignant or Cry Macho or King Richard. Suicide Squad got 2.8 million. Space Jam, 2.1 million. So it wasn't like, I mean, they had viewership on HBO Max for those, and that was pretty much it. So maybe it didn't make too much of a dent on the box office anyway, the way they kind of put that together and how it works. But their global growth, when it comes through the fourth quarter of 2019, all the way to now, they've grown from 34 million to 45 million subscribers for HBO Max and their HBO subscriptions in general. So it did grow. That's international. And when you're breaking that down, 24 million domestic and another 20 million globally overall. And in the meantime, domestic, you had, there was some way that things came up. But again, they can't do that again. They just can't keep that going. So that's what's most important for them. They have to figure a way around it. I have one story from radio that I wanted to bring up here real quick here that I thought was interesting when it comes to radio listenership through the smart speakers. If you're not able to get people to actually listen in through their dashboard on their car, the smart speakers is that actually helping out? Because people could just think of a station to listen to and just ask for it on their smart speaker. And because of the fact that all the radio stations have been trying to go ahead and promote the fact of listening through your smart device. Just asking for a station. So Jacobs Media Research, Fred Jacobs, who's a major consultant in radio, they did a tech survey and they stuck to 40,000 core radio listeners in 2021, learning that listening to a terrestrial radio station, AM and FM, on Amazon, Google Home, and other similar devices is becoming a prime use case. Consumers are still asking Alexa for the weather and listen to Pandora or Spotify, but more and more they're using smart speakers to tune into a favorite radio station. So when they asked smart speaker owners whether they've been listening to more or less the same amount of AM, FM radio since they acquired a smart speaker, 15% are saying listening more percentage is impressive. 15% are listening more if they're listening through a smart speaker. The only issue that some of these people that are having by not bringing smart speakers into their home is the privacy issue if they're being listened to by one of these devices. The other part that people are saying about when it comes to smart speakers are they that useful? For instance, there's a report in the story here that new Alexa users discover half of the features they will ever use within 3 hours of activating the device. So what they are trying to say in this story is the fact that radio is still part of many people's routines and that listeners are still creatures of habit. They still got to listen to radio, and that radio listening is part of their activities normally. So the whole idea is, could Amazon, the Alexa users, could they be more encouraged by radio stations and enticed to have them encourage more of their users to ask to listen to radio stations so that there can be more garnering a listenership, thus more listeners listening to advertisers, whatever that might be. Now, to follow up on my discussion on the lack and the drop of television news, Pointer.org also put a story out saying that trust in media is low worldwide. Are media outlets reaching out to the wrong people? And so in their story, they're saying there's countless efforts to increase trust in news. Few have reached beyond existing readers and likely subscribers that are truly skeptical. So in the story, they mentioned that there was a report late last year from the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism at the University of Oxford that's offering a sobering caution. Few efforts to build reader trust have reached beyond existing readers and likely subscribers that are truly skeptical. So they talked to Rasmus Kleis Nielsen, director of the Institute, and the fact that if their findings could be read as pessimism about the entire trust effort, instead he said it was realism. Even if the truth is not entirely welcome, we need to be clear-eyed about the incentives at play. Right now, the incentives turn out to be foremost retaining subscribers or broadcast audiences paired with a new paid digital base. So few individual news organizations have clear incentives for investing in building trust with indifferent, skeptical, or outright hostile parts of the public. And few of the organizations with trust-building initiatives can point to systematic efforts for tracking their effectiveness. And they surveyed among 46 countries, and the report shows that trust levels are the lowest in the United States, ranked last among 46 countries surveyed. When you're in the money business, when it comes to journalism, you just can't just do regular journalism. You have to sensationalize it. And it's now gotten to the point where you just can't take it serious anymore. That doesn't mean you can't look for journalism. You can't find news. But the way it's portrayed now, the antiquated style of watching television news or cable news, you just can't watch it anymore. Better just to watch clips that somebody pulls up for you, but you don't need to watch it and consume that kind of content. It's just not healthy. It isn't. Now, the other part they're saying is the principal measure of trust is the attitude of lay users alone. And that they looked at the trust challenge and how it's playing out with the news organizations. Given finite resources, it may make sense to individual organizations to focus engagement efforts narrowly on best prospects. The trouble for journalism more generally is if news outlets each focus on building trust with those already most likely to trust them, and many already compete for attention, trust, and reader revenue from the same, often relatively trusting and privileged parts of the public, the people most indifferent to or distrusting towards news, who are most difficult to reach and most resistant to such appeals, are frankly often less commercially attractive or at risk of leaving left behind or further alienated. So they're not going to play to the pessimistic. They're not going to play to the cynical, which means they're going to alienate the audience that could have been with them, but they've lost them. They don't want to say it's realistic. Yeah, there's an audience they cannot retain back. So sure, let's see if you can try to bring streaming services together, which we talked about last week, to try to go ahead and follow the audience to where they are leaving news behind, going to streaming, watching scripted content, or watching other movies or anything like that, just not watching the news. They don't need to watch the news. They're not going to worry about it. They'll catch it on social media. They'll catch it some other place. But they're not going to go watch on television to go catch news. They're not doing it anymore. And you're seeing the erosion continue. It's just that way. Paul Volpe, who is an editor of the New York Times Trust Team and back in September, he says that the perspective that there are groups of hardcore loyalists who already believe you and the unconvertible who never will. Well, I don't say if it's the unconvertible who never will. There was a time where some audiences would at least consume the content if it was at least there was information being disseminated and being delivered accurately. But we know that's not happening as much. So the fact that they're trying to say it's the who unconvertible, well, you don't need to convert anybody. That's the whole point. Why do we need hardcore loyalists who believe you? So that means they believe what is said to be truth. But the truth is we don't know if it really is true or not. You know, who's going to fact check the fact checkers? Who's going to fact check those news sources? And who's going to hold accountable these big on high corporate news organizations of what they're doing? There's not a governing body that's going after them. Let me put it to you like this. Do the FCC, does that body, if there's any information that's being wrong, like is there any kind of penalty being done? No. Because that journalism is still protected under the First Amendment. I mean, if you wanted to fix it, you could have somebody that's trying to come in and say, okay, on these news organizations, inaccuracy leads to fines, leads to penalties. But that's not going to happen. That's not the way this country is founded. It's not the way it's being done. Then there's also the blame of the social media, that social media comments, many of them being based on the incomplete picture a headline paints, rather than an assessment of the whole story, that posts may point the way to subsequent stories such as needing to address commenters' news concerns. And then there's a perspective by the managing editor and vice president of the Star Tribune in Minneapolis, Suki Dardarian, that says, quote, if they're older, disinterested people, how hard do I have to work to get those people when I have a bunch of younger people coming in who might be more interested? Like, I'm not saying I'm writing them off, but, if I have to make some choices. So the alienating of the audience, they're just giving up on them. They're just going to try to stick to the audience they can hold on to. It's not a good way to, any forward growth, but this is the thought process of the news. That's where they are right now. The Institute leader here, Nielsen, says that outlets, quote, should be as clear as possible with the mission of the organization. particularly in an era where large segments of the public suspect hidden agendas. You need to have ideals, say it, and then show it. Well, part of it needs to be is that the delivery system of all these news outlets needs to change. You need to blow up the way they report news, because nobody wants to hear it the same way with this news speak that you hear, and these people being completely out of touch with reality when they're stuck in their bubbles and they're relatively affluent and rich and well-to-do, and they don't have to worry about the everyday goings-on of the stories that they report. They can't even relate. So why even try? Another part is that outlets need to spend more time facing facts about what they think about alternate trust strategies. No one can do everything. Now, there's a thing that was being written about how the CBC, Canadian Broadcast Corporation, they have an initiative now to embed journalists in pop-up newsrooms in remote Indigenous communities within the Los Angeles Times that's reckoning with its own history of inadequately covering the many ethnic and racial groups it tends to serve. So yeah, trying to, correct the wrongs of the past. So there's the agenda thought process here of 2022 that includes more academic work to understand the everyday impact of platforms and devising online experiments to see what's working among what's being tried. Again, I say blow it up. Change it all together. The Reuters report notes that hostile assaults from some politicians on the media are prevalent here, and it's a huge issue for the Brazilian and Indian editors participating in the study. The level of hostility towards journalists and their organizations, together with echo chambers for animosity and misinformation, have induced a grim mood among many journalists. If it doesn't suggest any easy solutions, but the Reuters authors, according to this Pointer report, they say this is no time to give up on identifying persuadable audience segments and a sustained effort to gain their trust. So as they're saying, they're trying to say that, you have to give up on some of the audience you have out there. There's not much can be done. And part of the reason why is because news engagement fell off a cliff, according to Axios. Let's talk about that. In their story, they make a point that the percentage change in news consumption habits, and this is according to Axios doing a whole study between various resources they have. Social media interactions with news articles are down 65% from 2020 to 2021. Cable news primetime viewers down 36%. We went through that extensively last week. News media app downloads down 33%. And unique visits to the top 5 news sites down 8%. Now, they try to go ahead and put their spin on what they think is the reason why. There's a number of issues when it comes to the president that was in office before, the presidential era of Donald Trump. They talk about the storylines and how news consumption was more scattered and diverted to sports, and the Omicron variant not jumpstarting Americans' engagement in COVID news like it did at the onset of the pandemic. So yeah, social media, that part is very interesting. They put in there 65% drop, and website visits for top performing U.S. news websites down 8% in the first 11 months of 2021. Whew, that's a lot. Among 4,000 publishers globally, according to Chartbeat, traffic declined 8% between 2020 and 2021. And when you compare December 2021 to January 2021, down nearly 20%. So if there's anything that's going to build some interest in news again, there's the Beijing Winter Olympics coming up in February and the 2020 midterm elections that could create traffic boosts for publishers looking to hold on to fleeting subscribers. The other thing you have overall that the story says is that you might have Hollywood award shows, the Super Bowl, and other sports championships that will help keep audiences watching live cable and network television, but sustaining TV viewership declines is still going to be a problem, and more Americans continue to migrate to streaming. So when you isolate yourself, this is where the corporate struggle continues. When you continue to go and say, you don't pay attention to your audience, when something gets broken or you're not following up with the times, and you're not providing good content on those traditional established services, then they're going to go somewhere else. The next technology will take them where they are. The digital disruption continues to disrupt, and there are no answers by these corporate giants on how to figure that out. This is why you, as an influencer, as a content creator, you need to keep yourselves in mind and say, There's so many other places I can do in 2022 to get audiences to me. So keep doing what you're doing, because the fight is real, and you can compete for viewers, you can compete for consumer dollars, just like these other entities. You might not have the reach or the revenue or the kind of, the gobs of cash to be able to make that happen, but you can build grassroots and you can build something of yourself. So keep doing what you're doing, and we're going to leave it there. Thanks for listening in. Appreciate all of you checking out. Of course, the website is broadcasterspodcast.com. Make sure to go and check it out. Any stories you want to go and follow up on, all the links for all the within those episodes are there. Or, of course, you can also find them in the descriptions wherever you subscribe to the show. Make sure to go and do that. And, of course, hit the YouTube channel, youtube.com/JBRASCO951. Great place if you want to go and comment about anything I talk about here on the show as well. So we'll leave it there. Thanks for listening in. Come back next week, and remember that content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.